Education is our passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to the people who prepare for it today. A very warm good morning to all my dear students. In our previous session, we studied about how the French Revolution inspired the world by the three ideals. Which were they, children? They were liberty, equality and fraternity. We also learned about how colonial rule affected the life of the natives of Latin America and the leaders who contributed to the freedom struggle of Latin America. Let us now begin with our third session. So children, today we will be learning about the Russian Revolution.
Students, look at the slide. This slide shows some important lines taken from a Russian novel called The Mother, written by Maxim Gorky. So now let us see what the line says. We are the workers, people by whose labor all things are made, from children's toys to machines. Yet we are people deprived of the right to defend our human dignity. Anyone can exploit us for their interest. At present, we want to achieve a degree of freedom which will eventually enable us to take all power into our own hands. Our slogans are simple. Down with private property. All means of production in the hands of people. All power in the hands of the people. No one exempt from work. Now you can understand that we are not just writers. We are revolutionaries and will go on being revolutionaries as long as some people do nothing but give orders and others do nothing but work. The above lines were taken from the novel The Mother, written by a famous Russian writer, Maxim Gorky. These lines reflect or depicts the plight of the workers and farmers and the aims in Russia. Through the lines taken from the novel The Mother, written by Maxim Gorky, reflects or depicts the demands of the workers in the Russian society. Now let's see what the demands were. Abolish the private property system. So here private property system was abolished. Secondly, everyone has to work. People must be entrusted with the factors of production. So students, already in our earlier classes we have learned about what factors of production are. So I hope you remember. Which are they? The four factors of production are land, labor, capital and organization. And finally, everyone has freedom. So once again we go with the demands. Abolish the private property system. Second one, everyone has to work. Third one, people must be entrusted with the factors of production. And finally, everyone has freedom. The circumstances that led the Russian workers in framing different demands were: farmers and factory workers in Russia led a tragic life under the autocracy of the Tsarist emperors who ruled Russia. So Tsarist emperors, that is, Tsars were the monarchs or supreme rulers. They believed in autocracy, wherein all the power and wealth rested in the hands of the rulers. Due to the autocratic rule of the Tsars, farmers and workers revolted against them. Second one, the low agricultural production affected the farmers' income. Moreover, the landless farmers had to pay huge tax. So here, although when the agricultural production was very meager, even then the farmers had to pay huge taxes. Although Russia was rich in natural resources, their industrial production was meager. It was the foreigners who controlled the majority of the industries that existed Now let us move on to some famous Russian writers who depicted the plight of the workers and farmers through their works. They were Maxim Gorky, Leo Tolstoy, Ivan Turgenev, Anton Chekhov. So, Maxim Gorky, Leo Tolstoy, Ivan Turgenev, Anton Chekhov. So, once again, Maxim Gorky, Leo Tolstoy, Ivan Turgenev, Anton Chekhov. Marxist ideologies were put forward by two people. They were Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. So Marxist ideologies were put forward by which two people? Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. In the book called The Communist Manifesto. So the Communist Manifesto was written by two people, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Now let us move on to the features of Marxist ideologies. So we already mentioned earlier that two people prepared the Marxist ideologies. They were Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Apart from that, Marxist ideologies stirred the workers. That is, they motivated the workers through Marxist ideologies. Also, they called for establishing the supremacy of the workers instead of giving more importance to the capitalists. And finally, trade unions were formed to find solutions or remedies for the plight of the workers. So once again, features of Marxist ideologies put forward by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. The ideologies stirred the workers. They called for establishing the supremacy of the workers instead of that by the capitalists. Finally, trade unions were formed to find remedies for the plight of the workers. Now, based on the Marxist ideologies, Social Democratic Workers' Party was formed. So, based on Marxist ideologies, which party was formed? Social Democratic Workers' Party was formed. Later, Social Democratic Workers' Party was split into two. First one as the Bolsheviks, which were the majority, and second one as the Mensheviks, which were the minority. So Social Democratic Party was split into two, Bolsheviks as the majority and Mensheviks as the minority. Main leaders of the Bolsheviks were Vladimir Lenin and Trotsky. So the main two leaders of Bolsheviks were Vladimir Lenin and Trotsky, whereas the main leader of Mensheviks, which were the minority, was Alexander Kerensky. So the main leader of minority, that is Mensheviks, was Alexander Kerensky. So once again, Social Democratic Workers' Party. This party was based on the Marxist ideologies. Later this party was split into two. They were the Bolsheviks, which were the majority, and second one Mensheviks, which were the minority. The main leaders of the Bolsheviks were Vladimir Lenin and second one Trotsky. Main leader of the Mensheviks was Alexander Kerensky. So the main leaders of the Bolsheviks, that is the majority, were Lenin and Trotsky. Main leader of the Menshevik party, that is minority, was Alexander Kerensky. The crisis in Russia reached its worst when Russia was defeated in the Russia-Japan War in the year 1905. The workers organized a huge march at Petrograd on 9th of January 1905 demanding for two things. Firstly, they wanted political rights, and secondly, they wanted economic reforms. So the workers, what did they do? They conducted a huge march at Petrograd on which year? 9th of January 1905, demanding for two things. Which were they? They were economic reforms and the political rights. The march was fired at by the soldiers and hundreds of demonstrators were massacred. This incident in the history of Russia came to be known as the Bloody Sunday. So once again we will go through what is Bloody Sunday. The crisis reached its worst when Russia was defeated in the Russia-Japan War in 1905. The workers organized a huge march at Petrograd on 9th of January 1905, demanding for political rights and economic reforms. The march was fired at by the soldiers and hundreds of demonstrators were massacred. This event is known as the Bloody Sunday. Workers' organization called the Soviets was formed all over Russia to conduct strikes. When the strikes attained its maximum strength, the Emperor of Russia was forced or compelled to form a legislative assembly called the Duma. So what is Duma? Workers' organization called the Soviets were formed all over Russia to conduct strikes. When the strikes gained maximum strength, the emperor was compelled to form a legislative assembly called Duma. Ignoring the protests from Duma, Nicholas II, the then Tsar of Russia, decided to participate in the First World War, which began in the year 1914. A lot of soldiers were killed in the war. By the year 1917, Russia experienced a massive food or severe food shortage. Thus, thousands of women marched and protested towards Petrograd on 8th of March 1917, clamoring for bread. Along with the thousands of women, the workers too protested at Petrograd. Though the soldiers initially clashed with the demonstrators, later they too joined the worker class. It was the tragic experience in the First World War that forced the soldiers to join the worker class. Thus, the workers captured Petrograd and Nicholas II, the then Tsar of Russia, was dethroned. Hence, a provisional government was formed under the leadership of Alexander Kerensky. So, who was Alexander Kerensky? He was the leader of the Mensheviks. As the Russian calendar was a few days behind the international calendar, the revolution that took place in March came to be known as the February Revolution. So students, once again we'll go through February Revolution. Workers' organizations called the Soviets were formed all over Russia to conduct strikes. When the strikes gained maximum strength, the emperor was compelled to form a legislative assembly called Duma. Ignoring the protest from Duma, Nicholas II, the then Tsar of Russia, decided to participate in the First World War that started in 1914. A lot of Russian soldiers were killed in this war. Food shortage became severe by 1917. Thousands of women marched along the streets of Petrograd on 8th of March 1917, clamoring for bread. Clamoring means speaking or screaming loudly for bread. The workers organized protest march in Petrograd. Though the soldiers clashed with the demonstrators in the beginning, later they joined the workers. It was the tragic experience during the First World War that induced them to do so. The workers captured Petrograd and Nicholas II was thrown out of power. A provisional government was formed under Alexander Kerensky, the Menshevik leader. Since the Russian calendar was a few days behind the
international calendar, this revolution that took place in March came to be known as the February Revolution. A group of Soviets did not approve the provisional government which was under the leadership of Alexander Kerensky, who was the main leader of the Mensheviks. Vladimir Lenin, who had been in Switzerland, came back to Russia and strongly opposed the provisional government which was led by Alexander Kerensky. So once again, a group of Soviets did not approve of the provisional government. Vladimir Lenin, who had been in Switzerland, came to Russia and strongly opposed the provisional government. Moving on to the demands put forward by Bolsheviks through Vladimir Lenin were, entire power should be in the hands of the Soviets, that is the worker class. Vladimir Lenin argued that only the proletarian government, that is the worker class, could eliminate or eradicate the centuries-old economic backwardness and inequalities. Urged for Russia to withdraw from the First World War, took over the lands owned by the lords, distributed the lands among the farmers, and finally factories were made the public property. So once again, demands put forward by Bolsheviks were, entire power should be transferred to the Soviets. Second one, they propagated that only the proletarians, that is the worker class government, could eradicate centuries-old economic backwardness and inequality. Thirdly, withdraw Russia from the First World War. Fourth one, seized the lands owned by the lords. Fifth one, distributed the lands among the farmers. And finally, made factories as public property. In October 1917, Bolsheviks, that is the majority, organized an armed rebellion against the provisional government under the leadership of Alexander Kerensky. Alexander Kerensky fled from Russia. Thus, Russia came under the control of the Bolsheviks. This event through which Bolsheviks attained power in Russia is known as the October Revolution. Thus, a convention of the Soviets was held and a cabinet was formed with Vladimir Lenin as its head. So once again, October Revolution. In October 1917, the Bolsheviks organized an armed rebellion against the provisional government. Alexander Kerensky fled from the country and Russia came under the control of the Bolsheviks. This event through which the Bolsheviks attained power is known as the October Revolution. Subsequently, a convention of the Soviets was held and a cabinet was formed with Lenin as its head. Moving to the last area of the Russian Revolution, that is the results of the Russian Revolution. First one, Russia withdrew from the First World War. So which is the first one? Russia withdrew from the First World War. Second one, seized out that land and distributed among the peasants. So the lands were taken from the landlords and they were distributed among the farmers. Third one, gave importance to public sector. Then introduced centralized planning. Next, achieved developments in the field of science, technology and economy. So achievement was developed in the fields of science, technology and economy. Then a new constitution came into force in the year 1924. Union of Soviet Socialist Republic was formed by consolidating different Soviet republics and finally spread the socialist ideas all over the world. So we'll once again go through the results of the Russian Revolution. First one, Russia withdrew from the First World War. Second one, seized out the land and distributed among the peasants. Third one, gave importance to the public sector. Fourth one, introduced centralized planning. Fifth one, achieved developments in the field of science, technology and economy. Sixth one, new constitution came into force in the year 1924. Seventh one, Union of Soviet Socialist Republic was formed by consolidating different Soviet republics and finally spread the socialist ideas all over the world. Children, let us now summarize what we studied under the Russian Revolution. Demand of the workers in the Russian society, the circumstances that led the Russian workers to make different demands, the Marxist ideologies, forming of the Social Democratic Workers' Party, which was later split into two, that is the Bolsheviks, which were the majority, and Mensheviks, which were the minority. The two leaders of the Bolsheviks party were Vladimir Lenin and Trotsky, whereas the leader for Menshevik was Alexander Kerensky. We then studied about an incident called Bloody Sunday. We studied about February Revolution. We went through the demands put forward by the Bolsheviks. We also learned about October Revolution, and finally we learned about the results of the Russian Revolution. Moving on to our assessment area, write down these questions and note down the answers in your notebook. First one, discuss the role of the October Revolution in establishing the proletarian government in Russia. I repeat, discuss the role of the October Revolution in establishing the proletarian government in Russia. Second question, Russian Revolution was greatly motivated by the despotic rule of Tsar. Discuss. I once again repeat the question. Russian Revolution was greatly motivated by the despotic rule of Tsar. Discuss. Students, that's all for today. I hope I was clear to you in this session. Thank you. Stay home, stay safe.